Earlier today, at my direction, the Salt Lake City Attorney's Office amended the city's lawsuit against the Inland Port Authority Board, the state of Utah, and Governor Gary Herbert to include changes made in House Bill 433, which passed during the 2019 legislative session. This bill made a bad deal for Salt Lake City even worse. HB 433 gave the Inland Port Board wall-to-wall authority over the entire jurisdictional area. House Bill 433 mandated that the Port Authority take 100% of the city's property tax increment. 433 added sales tax to the revenue sources the Port Authority will take from Salt Lake City. And 433 increased the amount of time the authority will take Salt Lake City's property tax increment from 25 years to 40 years. House Bill 433 is proof that the state has no intention of negotiating in good faith. The lawsuit I have filed continues to argue that the state's seizure of the city's taxing and land use authority is unconstitutional. The Utah Constitution wisely defines taxing and land use authority as core municipal functions. These state and land use decisions greatly impact the residents of any municipality, and they have the right to hold their elected officials accountable. The Utah Inland Port Authority legislation strips the residents of Salt Lake City of this right. Rather than being able to hold their city council members and mayor responsible for decisions, residents are left with protesting an unelected and unaccountable board. This is wrong, and this is unconstitutional. The city is also asking the court for an injunction to stop the Port Authority from spending or committing any of the city's property tax increment or sales tax, as well as prohibiting the authority from any planning, design, or construction of infrastructure until this lawsuit is resolved. During the last legislative session, the state of Utah authorized a $5 million loan to the Port Authority for the express purpose to build infrastructure. The legislation requires that the Port Authority repay this loan using the city's property tax increment. If the authority is allowed to proceed with this loan and to begin using the city's property tax increment, the city will suffer irreparable harm. To protect the taxpayers of Salt Lake City while this case proceeds, it is our hope the court will honor this injunction request. There is no question that this lawsuit is Salt Lake City's only hope to rectify this disaster. Negotiations have not worked. Every time Salt Lake City elected officials have gone back to the table to make adjustments, the city's core municipal functions have been weakened further. Make no mistake about it, without land use or taxing authority, the city has no control over what will happen on 19,000 acres of Salt Lake City's jurisdiction. I hope today can serve as a reset for every elected official in Salt Lake City. We may not agree with each other on everything, but I'd hope we can agree that we need the court's clarification on the limits of state authority and the proper role of municipal government. Let us finally stand united to fight this unprecedented attack on our community. Let us commit to see this case through to the end. And let us pledge not to compromise our values under the guise of negotiation. Our responsibility to the residents of Salt Lake City is to fight for their values, not just a seat at the table. Thank you.
Mayor, how soon till you get them before a judge?
How soon what?
Till you get before a judge. Are you seeking an emergency injunction?
Yeah, I would expect some sort of action from the courts by September, I would think.
And how much money are we talking about? Do you believe that the city would be losing without access to that, the property tax increment, the sales tax increment? How much money is our taxpayers in Salt Lake City losing?
Well, there's no way to really estimate that because some of that tax increment is from facilities that are already built, and some of it is from vacant property that needs to be developed. So it's hard to know, but we know it's in the hundreds of millions over that window of time.
But you are asking for basically the entire planning, construction, anything halt right now because...
Yes.
Okay.
Everything needs to come to a screeching halt until the courts can make a decision about our constitutional challenge.
And do you have to get a separate injunction, say, for that to start compared to an injunction?
Yes, we need the injunction because the state has already authorized a $5 million loan to the board, the Inland Port Board Authority. We want everything to be put on hold until we can get before the courts and plead our case on the constitutional issues.
Mayor, it seemed like you were calling for unity in your comments. What do you want to say to the city council, or just what are your thoughts about city council's position on this bill?
Well, and I made that statement in my words, but I do believe that this is our only path to really determining what our constitutional rights are in this situation, and that a seat at the table certainly has not served us well, as we saw legislation this year, again, further creeping into our municipal functions. Any other?
Why wait so long to serve the other parties?
We are not waiting. So
Well,
they.
excuse me, from when the original lawsuit was filed in March.
Well, as I stated, a new piece of legislation passed this year that further impacted our lawsuit. So we had to amend our complaint, and now is our day to serve the state government, the governor, and the board on this case.
Is this litigation about taking jurisdiction back into the city, or just stopping the Port Development Commission?
No, this is absolutely about getting back our constitutional rights of land use and tax authority. And we must do this battle. Nothing in a negotiation any less than that is worth it. The courts need to decide this.
If the city took control of development in the port, I've heard an argument that if the state has control, they're better able to set up hubs around the entire state so that a whole bunch of traffic and like idle emissions aren't as centralized in the Salt Lake City area. Could the state do, or could the city do that just as easily, or how would the city be able to set up different hubs?
Well, I find it very interesting that the hub and spoke model is one where the spokes, they're actually getting permission from the cities to set those up, whereas that is not the case in Salt Lake City. They just took it. So I think they've learned a little bit. But I will also say that, you know, what we envision for our community is based on our values. So the development would be based on city values of clean air, and it would also be based on electrification of any transportation options that would be out there. And that is not necessarily the trajectory of the state.
Another question I have is, it seems as though the state wants to run, or it's thought to run fossil fuels to the inland port, and it seems like that is not something that the city is interested in. But when you first conceptualized this
Well,
process in that part? What did you envision?
Yeah, so this isn't my concept. Let's be clear, I didn't conceive this. The state came to us looking for a partnership on a potential port. And we were at the table for a little while. But when it became very obvious the state wanted total control, that was a table I wasn't going to continue to sit at. I will say to you, though, that as a city, we have light manufacturing and warehouses in this neighborhood. That is what it was planned for. And that's where it is today under our own ordinances and our own planning policies. So that is real. Let's be very clear. The state has never defined what they are really trying to do out there, ever. So I don't want anyone to mistaken that there actually is a plan that has been presented by the state, because there is not.
Could you live with the inland port if you had more access, more control over all of that, or do you just not want this period?
Well, I don't think.
As you said, you have light manufacturing, you have industry setting
Right.
up there.
I think it should be up to our city to determine how that land is developed with the private partners that own that land. So you can call it what you want, but the state hasn't even came forward and said what they mean by that. So I hesitate to even go down that road, because people are married to this inland port idea, but the state has yet to define what they're really trying to do. So I will say to you, the big issue here is the city's loss of our land use and taxing authority, 100% of it. And we have lost control of a part of our sales tax. And guess what? In 2020, we'll probably lose it all. That's just how this has been going. As soon as you hit the goal line, they move the post a little further, and then they take more. So we'll see what happens in 2020.
Mayor, coming back to your comments last week about the city council, about how he never stood with you on this issue, and kind of joining that with your comments today, we hope this will be a reset for every elected official. Just how do you reconcile those comments?
Well, this is an opportunity, and an opportunity that I would hope the city council would take. The other thing I would say is that, at the end of the day, we absolutely are obligated as a city government to defend our residents and their taxes and their values on how they want this city developed. And that's exactly what we are doing.
Mayor, what do you think of the protests at the last two board meetings where people were disrupting the actual meeting and trying to get it shut down?
Well, I think people are very frustrated from how this whole process began. There was no public input in the very first bill that passed in 2018. And very little input on this bill that was passed this year. This is not how government should work. It should be much more transparent, and it should allow for public engagement and opportunity to weigh in. It should also be a partnership. We have partnered with the state on many things. This is not a partnership. This is a railroad job. And it's unfortunate that we've been railroaded, because as a community, we have a great deal of respect for the work that we've been doing in partnership with the state, and to just be run over and disregarded and disrespected is not something that this city government should allow, and we should stand up for our community.
So do you support the protest?
Absolutely I do, because people need to have a voice, and the public is frustrated that even more and more work is being done in closed doors, behind closed doors. At the end of the day, people on the board are not listening to this community. So of course there's going to be protests, and there likely will be more. And that is unfortunate for everyone. The state needs to wake up and start listening and come back to the table. And let's see if we can't get our authority back.
What happens with this when you're not married anymore?
You know, I've been watching the mayoral candidates. Most of them are saying they support the lawsuit. I question some of that because of past actions of some of the candidates. But I will say to you, this community absolutely should be voting for a mayor who will, without question, pursue this lawsuit beyond my tenure.
Who is that?
Well, who is that is right. Everyone has to decide who that person is going to be. But I will say to you, this is one of those issues where as a community, you should, without doubt, ask candidates where they are and what they will do come January when they are faced with managing this lawsuit.
And on, last week you mentioned, Senator Escamilla is that person.
What I said was Senator Escamilla has been the one person who is running for mayor that has stood strong on this issue and stood with the mayor's office on this issue. Never voted for these bills, also passed an air quality bill to see where we are at today with air quality in the Northwest Quadrant, so we have a baseline, cares about our air quality, and certainly has opposed this takeover by the state from the get-go.
But you're not full out endorsing her?
I have not endorsed any candidates in the mayor's race.
All right, she's gotta go. Sorry.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here.